Fascinating. Our third speaker is Bennie Kara, and she's well known for her fantastic teaching blog on the Huffington Post. She is a subject leader for English at the Bridge Academy Hackney and wrote an article on learning processes and coping mechanisms in the Teaching Leaders Quarterly, and you will all have one of these in your packs. Bennie will be discussing the importance of empathy and speaking and listening skills of both teachers and students in engaging students.
Right, I'm actually going to stand up because I'm a teacher and I can't see the people at the back, and that makes me really nervous, so you have to forgive me. I want to start off by kind of letting you know why this is important to me, why the idea of empathy is important to me. And it started off, as most things do with English teachers, with me reading a book. I actually read Simon Baron-Cohen's 0 Degrees of Empathy, A New Theory of Human Cruelty, which seems an odd choice for an English teacher. And it isn't necessarily a book about education, even though he does refer to schools and young people. He was talking about kind of decreasing levels of empathy and why people don't have very much empathy. And I started to think, hang on, this seems really familiar. There are things that he's talking about that I can apply directly to my classroom. He asserted that certain people exhibit a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others that begins in childhood or adolescence and continues into adulthood. I thought, what does that mean in my classroom? I'm thinking that violation of the rights of others, and it could be something as small as that constant calling out in the classroom. That child is not thinking about the child next to him or her. That child is not thinking about the impact on the teacher, the impact on the learning of 28 other people in the room. That child has got a decreased sense of empathy. And that can extend into those children who think it's okay to hit another child, who actually, spend the whole lesson tapping so that the other, someone across the room can't hear or get really distracted. And I thought, is there a decreased sense of empathy in our students? Well, I work in an inner city school. Bridge is in the middle of Hackney, one of the most deprived boroughs in the country. And there's a proven link between students from low socio-economic backgrounds, things like trauma, and there's a high prevalence of them not having secure attachment when they are very, very young. And they bring this kind of undeveloped empathy with them into our schools at the age of 11. And it had me thinking about what our responsibilities are. Now, our responsibilities are not just to teach a curriculum, but to teach them how to be better human beings and how to function in society. And if we allow them to leave with a C grade in whichever subject we teach and think, brilliant, that's our job done, we haven't actually done our job. What we've done is produce another C grade for a league table. Can they go out into society and use the social skills that they have acquired in school to good effect? We are, after all, educators and not just people who churn out results. I think that we've got a real sense of responsibility in our classrooms to develop that sense of empathy. And I wanted to talk about some really practical things that we can do. And it was really interesting, actually, when I was looking up, because I'm doing some research about this. Empathy was called a non-cognitive skill. And I thought even that term was fascinating because it kind of implies there is no direct link to anything intellectual. It is a soft skill. Even the word soft skill seems it's a bit fluffy, that somehow we have to teach children how to hug each other. And actually that's not true. Because to me there's a direct correlation between lowering that low-level disruption that often comes with an inability to empathise with the people around you and the teacher in front of you, to things like rates of exclusion, prolonged absences, not just for the person who is displaying that lack of empathy, but for those students who are affected by their behaviours. And certainly then it has that kind of knock-on effect on results. So in theory, we have a kind of panacea, except it's not a panacea. So if someone could have fixed this, they probably would have done so already. We teach children to be more empathetic alongside the curriculum and the knowledge that they require. Fewer of them stay out of school, get kicked out of school, stay at home because they don't enjoy school, and our results go up. It sounds so simple, but it is really not, and that's the difficulty. That's where we have to think of really practical ways forward. And that's where I think speaking and listening comes in. And I'm an English teacher and it's part of my curriculum to teach the skills of speaking and listening. And listening in particular is something that I think is often ignored in classrooms, partly because I would say that our curriculum kind of steers them towards the written and you do your reading skills, you do your writing skills. We don't necessarily learn what the listening actually means. And providing students with really practical skills to learn how to listen to each other better is a really clear way forward for all of us, regardless of our subject. And I think the whole school literacy kind of has this kind of, oh my goodness, they're going to make me do commas or apostrophes. And actually, if you think of whole school literacy as teaching a child how to speak better and to listen better, if you're a maths teacher or a science teacher or a PE teacher, you're actually teaching them a literacy, because I think empathy is the other literacy. I actually spent a long time trying to work out how many other literacies there were, and I got to like 27 and realised it wasn't catchy anymore, so I'm going to stick with the other literacy. The key areas to address when it comes to speaking and listening is that idea of collaboration. Group work needs to be planned. It needs to be something that is embedded into your medium-term schemes of work. And your team have to be on board on this, not just for an assessment level, but for the fact that if you teach them that very, very early on when they arrive in year 7, that your life will actually become easier in the long run. That if you are teaching them what listening actually means, the act of looking at the person who's talking, the act of turning your body physically, nodding in agreement, responding with something that that person has said, that you're much more likely to see disruption decrease. As middle leaders, I'm sure that you deal with your department's behaviour issues. Those children who constantly come to you, the language that we use with them in terms of empathy is really important. I think that linking the problematic behaviour to human effects, not just the effect it has on their grade, makes a massive difference. It's not so much if you behave this way, you are not going to get a C grade or you're not going to get a level 5. If you behave this way, this particular person is going to be affected. And one of the strategies that's worked quite well in behaviour management in the English department at Bridge is to encourage a student to have an empathetic response when there has been a behaviour issue. Think of the child at the other end of the classroom who never gets into trouble. What is that child thinking when you misbehave? And that process seems to be quite effective. You have a change in children's behaviour when you get them to start thinking about the human beings in the room. And modelling empathy. We tend to forget that everything we do is mimicked by the students, and if we are empathetic to them, they will learn that it is a process. Empathy is something that needs to be modelled. It is something that needs to be explicit. It's a process that you talk through. I'm doing this because it's a good thing to do. That person will appreciate this. I'm listening to you, therefore you should be listening to me. And I'm sure these are the things that you already do. In terms of how you can lead your department to become kind of empathy pioneers, if you like, it does sound a little bit ridiculous, I appreciate. I think understanding the theory behind it. If you work in an inner city school, teachers who don't understand the impact of kind of an empathy deficit will struggle to cope, and they will see the behaviours as problematic without really understanding where those students come from. So I think it is worth maybe setting up a little research project in the department to say, look, go out and look at the statistics on empathy and the impact it has on behaviour. There's a wealth of information out there. To actively seek, regardless of your subject, to weave in speaking and listening activities that are well planned and not just off the cuff into your schemes of work. It would be brilliant, if every department in every school had something to do with speaking and listening in their medium-term plans. The behaviour management becomes an empathy-led process, so your teachers are using the same language as you when it comes to the human beings in the room and not just attainment, even though it is important. And I think, it's not something that I promise makes a huge difference. It's not going to solve the problems of inner city schools, but I do think it's a cog in a very, very large machine. I think if you take that cog out, suddenly things start to fall apart. So it is certainly something worth considering.
Thank you, Betty.